In 1881, Charles Darwin published the last book of his life. Not about evolution, not about natural selection, about worms. He spent 40 years on it, conducted experiments in his garden at Down House, buried stones and watched them sink, measured soil turnover, calculated output, and at the end of 4 decades, he wrote something that the fertilizer industry has spent the last century hoping you would forget. It may be doubted whether there are many other animals which have played so important a part in the history of the world as have these lowly organized creatures. He was talking about earthworms. And he was right in a way that goes far beyond anything he could have fully measured with Victorian-era tools. Because Darwin understood something that no agrochemical company wants you to internalize. The most powerful fertilizer system ever discovered is already living underneath your feet. It costs nothing to activate. It runs on kitchen scraps. And once you understand how it works, you will never look at a bag of synthetic fertilizer the same way again. Today, we are building what I call the infinite fertilizer system. A device so simple it costs $2 to make. A buried pipe. That is it. But the biology it activates is so sophisticated, so self-regulating, so ancient, that it makes a $300 bag of organic fertilizer look primitive by comparison. By the time you finish this video, you will have everything you need to install one this weekend. And in 2 growing seasons, your garden soil will be so alive, so biologically rich, that your neighbors will ask what you are doing differently. But first, you need to understand what was almost lost. Long before Darwin, long before synthetic fertilizer, long before the USDA or NPK ratios or the Green Revolution, farmers in Mesopotamia, in India, in China, and in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica all independently arrived at the same observation. Soil near decomposing matter grew better crops. Not somewhat better, dramatically better, visibly better, consistently better. And the reason, though they could not name it in microbial terms, was always the same. Where there is decomposition, there are worms. Where there are worms, there is fertility. Ancient Roman agricultural texts by Columella, written around 60 AD, describe the movement of earthworms through garden plots as a sign of good land. Not a coincidence, not decoration, a signal that the soil was alive and capable. Roman estate managers would deliberately inoculate new plots with soil from productive areas, not understanding they were transferring worm populations and microbial communities. They just knew it worked. In medieval Europe, peasant gardeners maintained what they called dung heaps, directly adjacent to their kitchen gardens, not for aesthetics, but because they observed that plants near the rot were always more vigorous. The folk knowledge was there. The observation was accurate. But without a framework for understanding what was actually happening underground, the practice remained intuitive, imprecise, dependent on proximity rather than design. Then, in the 1970s, something changed. A researcher named Mary Appelhof, working from her home in Michigan, began conducting systematic experiments in vermiculture, the science of using worms to process organic material. She published her findings in a book called Worms Eat My Garbage in 1982, which became one of the most widely read homesteading texts of the 20th century. Appelhof documented that red wigglers, the composting worm, could process organic waste into a material with nutrient concentrations many times higher than conventional compost. The castings, the worm's excrement, contained 5 times more nitrogen, 7 times more phosphorus, and 11 times more potassium than ordinary topsoil. Not in synthetic, salt-heavy form that burns roots. In slow-release, plant bioavailable form that feeds the soil food web over weeks and months. The research was published. It was cited. A small community of gardeners and homesteaders built on it. And then, as always happens with knowledge that threatens a $50 billion annual fertilizer industry, the momentum stalled. Because the moment gardeners understand that worms can deliver fertilizer directly to plant roots at no cost, the entire market logic of the synthetic fertilizer industry begins to collapse. But the biology did not disappear. The worms did not disappear. The knowledge survived the same way useful knowledge always survives, in the hands of people who paid attention. And now we are going to build it. Here is what is actually happening underground when this system runs. Because if you understand the biology, you will never neglect the system. And you will never need to. Your garden soil, even depleted, tired, compacted garden soil, contains earthworm populations. They are there, dormant or sparse or driven deep, but present. Earthworms are chemotactic, meaning they navigate toward chemical signals in the soil. When organic material begins to decompose, it releases a specific cocktail of volatile compounds, carbon dioxide, fermentation byproducts, ammonia from protein breakdown, and microbial metabolites. To an earthworm, these signals are the equivalent of a dinner bell. They will travel through soil to reach them. This is the mechanism the system exploits. You place a perforated pipe in the center of your garden bed. You fill it with kitchen scraps. Microbes begin breaking down that material within 24 to 48 hours. As decomposition accelerates, chemical signals radiate outward through the soil in every direction. Worms detect those signals and begin moving toward the source. They enter the pipe through the holes you drilled. They consume the partially decomposed material, and then they exit back into the surrounding bed. But here's the part that most people miss. The worm does not stay in the pipe. The pipe is a feeding station. The worm is the delivery vehicle. As each worm exits through the holes and moves through your garden bed, it is doing three things simultaneously. It is depositing castings, the richest plant-available fertilizer on Earth, directly at the root zone of your plants. It is creating channels and tunnels that allow water to penetrate more deeply and roots to extend more freely. And it is inoculating the surrounding soil with beneficial microbes that hitchhike through its digestive system. Over time, a single worm tower in the center of a 4 by 8 foot bed will create a fertility gradient that radiates outward to every corner. The soil nearest the pipe becomes the richest first. But within one full growing season, the biology spreads. The worm population multiplies. The channels multiply. The microbial diversity multiplies. And the plant growth that results is not the temporary, forced growth you get from synthetic fertilizer. It is deep, structural, biological growth, the kind that makes plants disease-resistant and drought-tolerant and genuinely productive. This is not chemistry, it is ecology. And ecology, once established, runs itself. Now let us talk about what this system costs, because this is where the entire premise of the fertilizer industry falls apart. A 4-inch diameter PVC pipe, 24 inches long. At most hardware stores, you can find offcuts or short sections for $1 to $3. That is the core of the system. You will also need a drill with a 1/2-inch bit, which you probably already own, a cap or lid for the top, which can be as simple as a frisbee, a plastic container lid, or a piece of wood, and kitchen scraps, which you are going to throw away anyway. Total cost, $2 if you buy nothing else and use what you have. Compare that to a 40-pound bag of slow-release organic fertilizer, which runs between $35 and $60 at any garden center. A bag that you use up in one season, that you have to drive to buy, carry home, apply on schedule, and reorder next spring. A bag manufactured in a facility, transported by truck, packaged in plastic, and sold to you on the premise that your soil cannot feed itself. Your soil can feed itself. It has been doing so for 450 million years, since the first land plants appeared and the first soil organisms evolved alongside them. The industrial fertilizer system is not an improvement on that biology. It is a bypass of it, and bypasses when you use them long enough cause the original system to atrophy. The worm tower does the opposite. It rehabilitates the original system. It invites the biology back, and once that biology is thriving, your soil becomes more productive every year, not less. This is what compounding looks like in a garden. Not inputs, output. Let us build it, step by step. No equipment you do not already have. No expertise required. Step 1. Choose your pipe. You want a 4 to 6 inch diameter pipe or cylinder. PVC is the most common and cheapest. A food-grade plastic bucket with the bottom cut off also works. So does a section of corrugated drainage pipe. The material matters less than the dimensions. You want something roughly 18 to 24 inches long. This gives you enough depth to stay below the soil's temperature fluctuation zone, where conditions remain stable and worm activity is consistent year-round. Step 2. Drill the holes. Using a 1/2-inch drill bit, make holes across the entire buried section of the pipe. Space them roughly 2 inches apart in a grid pattern. Do not drill holes in the top 4 to 6 inches of the pipe, the section that will remain above ground. You want all the activity happening underground, where worms already live. More holes mean more surface area for worm access, and more contact between the decomposing material and the surrounding soil biology. Do not be conservative here. Drill liberally. Step 3. Choose your location. The pipe goes in the center of your bed, not the edge. The center, because the fertility gradient radiates outward equally in all directions, and you want the entire bed to benefit. If you have a long bed, say 4 by 12 feet, install 2 pipes, one at each third of the bed. The pipe should be no more than 18 inches from any plant you want to feed, though over time, the worm population will colonize the entire bed regardless. Step 4. Bury the pipe. Dig a hole and set the pipe so that 2/3 of it is underground. For a 24-inch pipe, roughly 16 inches goes below soil level and 6 to 8 inches remain above. Pack the soil firmly around the pipe so it does not shift. This above ground section is your feed chute. It is where you load scraps. It keeps rain out when covered and keeps pests from accessing the contents. Step 5. The lid. This is important. You need something to cover the top of the pipe between feedings. Not because worms need darkness. They do not interact with the top section, but because the lid prevents flies from laying eggs in the scraps, keeps excess rainwater from flooding the system, and maintains the temperature differential that makes the pipe a more attractive destination than ambient soil. A plastic container lid, a piece of slate, a terracotta saucer, a fitted cap from the hardware store. Anything that covers the opening works. Step 6. Activate the system. For the first feeding, add a small handful of existing garden soil or finished compost into the bottom of the pipe before you bury it. This inoculates the system with microbial life and gives decomposition a head start. Then, once buried, your first scraps go in. Now, let us talk about what to feed it, because what you put in determines how fast the biology activates and how quickly worm populations begin responding. The best inputs are fruit and vegetable scraps. Banana peels are exceptional because they decompose quickly and attract worms rapidly. Coffee grounds are nearly perfect, slightly acidic, high in nitrogen, and microbially active. Vegetable trimmings, carrot tops, celery ends, pepper seeds, onion skins, crushed eggshells, which decompose slowly but add calcium and help moderate pH. Shredded cardboard and paper, which provide carbon to balance the nitrogen-heavy food scraps and give worms a medium to move through. What you do not put in matters equally. No meat, no dairy, no oily or heavily seasoned food. These decompose into compounds that are toxic to soil biology, attract the wrong kind of decomposers, including rats and flies, and create anaerobic zones that kill worm activity. No large quantities of citrus. Lemon and orange peels in small amounts are fine, but concentrated citrus is acidic enough to deter worms entirely. Nothing treated with herbicides or pesticides, which means be careful with produce that is not organic. The chemical residues can persist through decomposition and damage the worm population you are trying to build. The rhythm of feeding is flexible. Once or twice a week is ideal. A full pipe is not the goal. A consistently replenished pipe is. You are not trying to overwhelm the system with material. You are trying to maintain a steady, attractive signal that keeps worm traffic moving in and out. Think of it less like filling a composter and more like maintaining a slow drip, consistent, moderate, ongoing. Here is what happens across the first growing season. And I want to be specific because this is where most systems fail people. They expect immediate visible results and stop paying attention when they do not see them. In the first 2 weeks, nothing visible happens. Below the surface, microbial populations are exploding. Decomposition is beginning. Chemical signals are radiating through the soil, but you will not see any of this. You will see a pipe with a lid. Keep feeding it. By weeks 3 and 4, if you dig carefully near the holes, you will begin to find worms in the immediate vicinity of the pipe. They are arriving. They are investigating. They are beginning to enter and feed. The soil directly around the pipe will start to feel different, looser, slightly darker, more crumbly in texture. By month 2, you will notice your plants, not dramatically, not overnight, but a deepening of color, a robustness in the stems, a rate of growth that is slightly faster than what you are used to. This is the fertility gradient beginning to express itself above ground. By the end of the first growing season, the soil structure within 3 feet of the pipe will have changed measurably. The worm castings accumulating underground are holding moisture differently. Soil that used to crust after rain will remain porous. You will water less. You will see fewer signs of nutrient deficiency. Your plants will carry more fruit, more reliably, with more consistent size. By year 2, you will not recognize the soil in that bed. The worm population will have multiplied several times over. The microbial diversity will be orders of magnitude richer than when you started. The soil will look dark, smell faintly like earth after rain, and feel like something you want to put your hands into. This is not metaphor. This is documented soil science. Long-term studies on vermicomposting systems have shown measurable increases in soil organic matter, microbial biomass, and water retention within 12 to 18 months of continuous application. The compounding effect is real, and it accelerates every year you maintain the system. There are a few things most guides on this system will not tell you. Winter. In cold climates, worm activity slows dramatically below 50 degrees Fahrenheit and stops below 40. Your pipe will still function as a slow decomposer through winter, but the worm traffic will cease until soil temperatures rise in spring. This is not a failure. The decomposed material sitting in the pipe over winter becomes intensely rich, densely microbial compost that releases into the soil the moment spring warms the ground and worm activity resumes. Think of it as a loaded spring. You keep feeding through winter in moderate quantities. The system catches up fast when conditions allow. Multiple beds. Once you understand how a single pipe works, the math becomes obvious. 3 beds, 3 pipes. Total additional investment, $6. The principle scales without complexity. Each bed becomes a self-contained fertility engine. You are not hauling compost from one location to another. You are generating fertility in place, exactly where it is needed. Apartment and container gardening. A smaller version of this principle works in large containers. A 4-inch pipe buried in a half wine barrel or large planter, reaching down into the root zone, fed with kitchen scraps. The contained environment actually accelerates worm activity because the biology concentrates. Urban gardeners who run these systems in large containers report root zone fertility that outperforms any potting mix they have ever bought. What not to expect. This system will not fix depleted, compacted concrete-like soil in 30 days. If your starting soil is very poor, the first season is about establishing the biology, not about harvest yields. Give it time. The organisms you are cultivating have been building the world's topsoil for hundreds of millions of years. They are patient, and they are effective. You simply have to stop interfering and let them work. Darwin understood something at the end of his life that the agricultural industry has never had an incentive to teach you. He calculated that earthworms in a single acre of English pasture turned over 10 tons of soil every year. Not with machines, not with chemicals, with bodies smaller than your finger, moving through the darkness beneath your feet, eating, excreting, tunneling, dying, and enriching, year after year, without interruption, without input, without a purchase order, or a subscription, or a delivery truck. The fertility was always there. The system was always running. Every garden that has ever produced extraordinary food without extraordinary effort has done so because someone understood this and chose to work with it instead of around it. A $2 pipe, a lid, kitchen scraps you were already throwing away. That is the entry point. But what you are actually building is something far larger. You are opting out of the assumption that your land is inert and must be fed from outside. You are choosing instead to see your soil as what it actually is. A living system with its own intelligence, its own logic, its own productivity, waiting to be invited back into partnership. 5 years from now, you will reach into that garden bed and pull out a carrot or a tomato or a handful of green beans and feel something that is hard to describe to people who have not experienced it. A kind of quiet sufficiency, an understanding that the ground beneath you is genuinely alive and genuinely on your side. Your neighbors will buy bags of fertilizer every spring. They will talk about their plants struggling. They will wonder why their soil never seems to improve. And you will smile because you buried a $2 pipe in your garden bed and let the worms do what they have always done, and your soil gets richer every single year. This is what Darwin spent 40 years trying to tell us. The pipe is waiting. The worms are already there. If this opens something for you, subscribe so you do not miss the next system, and share this with someone who is still paying for something the ground would give them for free.